Hello, everyone. I am Teresa Nissen. I am the Director of Training and Professional Development for IALD, and I'm here to introduce a presentation and to go over a few housekeeping notes. If you have any questions, please click on the Q&A icon at the bottom to type in your questions, and they will be answered at the end of the presentation. If you have any technical issues or have any other things to chat about, please put those in the chat function. And like the other sessions of Enlighten Europe, this session will be recorded and it will be available after the conference. Also, your cameras will be turned off and your microphones will be muted for the sessions. And now I'd like to introduce our panel, and we have David Becker of David Becker Designs, who is an Associate ILD, a CLD, and the Chair of the CLD Commission. Andrew Jaques of the Flaming Beacon is an ILD professional member and a CLD. David and Andrew will provide an overview of the CLD, and this will be followed by live question and answers with Peter Raynham, who is a member of the CLD Commission. So this presentation, the recorded part, was aired briefly in Australia over the summer, but it's a good overview of the CLD, so we're showing it again, but then Peter will come on to answer your questions live. So here's the presentation.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining this session. The purpose is to explain actually what CLD is all about, and I recognize that it's not a thrilling topic, but it's immensely important, and Andrew and I will do our very best to keep it short and engaging. And hopefully it will entice you to get engaged with the process. And if you like what we have to say today, there's a follow-up webinar on the 2nd of July next week, and we will take you through the process of actually doing an application. So why is CLD important? Well, all mature professions have a system of certification. It's a method of defining professional standard, and we're kidding ourselves if we think we can be different. Now, as it currently stands, anyone can say they're a lighting designer. There's absolutely no obligation to have any skill or any ability. All you need to do is get some business cards printed and say, I'm a lighting designer. And this basically says anyone can do it, therefore there's no skill. And so this is why certification is so terribly important. It seriously erodes our standing as a profession and will limit the ability of the profession to grow and have the respect that it deserves. Now, if we don't get to grip with defining competency within our own profession, like all other mature professions do, there's a real risk that others will try and define it for us. Processes and restrictions could be imposed on the practice of architectural lighting design that don't suit the way that we work. And if this were to happen, we will not have any control over the outcome. So IALD recognized that if it didn't spearhead these efforts, there may be other organizations that seek to do it and to impose restrictions over what we do. Now, I'm going to hand over to Andrew now, and he's going to talk a little bit about his experience.
Thanks, David. First, I wanted to congratulate the IALD for establishing the CLD. It's a fantastic and necessary initiative, and I'm proud to have qualified. For me, I had a growing concern that if we as the lighting design professionals don't fill the space of the so-called lighting expert, then it'll be filled for us by those whose interests are unlikely to align with our own. There's a lot of unknowns about how we as a profession will be regarded in the future. Our place, including our place in the project's consulting team. We are often positioning ourselves somewhere between being part of the creative team and also part of the technical team. In many ways, not unlike the role of the architect. Not that long ago, lighting was simple and concerns such as climate change were not pressing factors they are today. Things have necessarily evolved since those days and are likely to continue to do so. One day soon, there may be need to define what a lighting expert is for all number of reasons, and this could affect the way that we do our job. For me, it's important to be part of a group that can demonstrate capability across the many complexities that make for good lighting environments, and for that group to be recognised as the most qualified to do so. I wanted to talk specifically about this idea of deserving a seat at the table. The table I'm talking about is the one shared with the lead consultants. I've spoken to many colleagues and peers, and we all have stories about architects making our life difficult. This difficulty stems from a general lack of trust in our profession. During these lighting workshops, sometimes we win the lighting arguments, but sometimes as minor consultants we lose. And sometimes we need to invest a lot of time to prove something we already know is in fact true. And the question is why? And I think the answer lies partly in our perceived level of expertise, as David has mentioned earlier. Take, for example, the process it takes to become a registered architect in Australia in 2020. Graduating from high school with good grades, the architecture student embarks on a 3-year undergraduate degree. This is followed by a gap year to experience working life in an architect's office. An extra year to travel overseas is encouraged, so the student gains first-hand experience wandering through significant international works of architecture, presumably in the hope that they will become well-rounded architects. On their return to study, they begin a 2-year postgraduate study to achieve their Masters in Architecture. Now, as a graduate, they must be able to demonstrate in a professional workplace competency across the many aspects of architectural practice. And finally, they must sit an exam with the Architecture Board, which I am reliably informed by my architecture friends is not a walk in the park. Absolute minimum time from embarking on a career in architecture to being able to call yourself an architect is 8 to 10 years. Calling yourself an architect is an achievement. Let's compare this to what is required to call yourself a lighting designer in 2020. It literally takes as long as being able to utter the words, "I am a lighting designer." No wonder we don't automatically receive or deserve respect. Let's compare this to the process to call yourself a certified lighting designer in 2020. Probably you've completed an undergraduate study in the creative field, typically 2 to 3 years. You've then probably done your postgraduate studies in lighting, which would take another 1 to 2 years. You would then find employment and work your way up to a lead role, at least 1 year, and probably many, many more. Certainly in our practice, it would be unusual to be in a lead role in less than 2 or 3 years. And finally, having obtained this level of having obtained the lead role on projects, you'll need to cover a diversity of projects over a minimum of 3 years, until finally you're able to apply for certification. This process to achieve CLD typically takes 8 to 10 years, much like that for an architect to become registered and call themselves an architect. So one of the reasons I decided to get CLD is to know demonstrably that I deserve to be at that table as an equal. I encourage everybody eligible to become certified. The more of us, the better. I'm now going to hand you back to David.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks very much. So IALD has funded a certification program designed by lighting designers for lighting designers. Now, the point of this webinar is really to try and demystify what it is. It's a portfolio-based assessment. In fact, it's the first international portfolio-based credential for lighting designers in the world, and it's intended to align the lighting design with the same competency standards as our project colleagues work to, much as Andrew has just gone through. Why do it? Well, our profession of architectural lighting design has matured to a point where it needs to abide by the competency standards expected of all mature professions. Legitimacy, it legitimizes our industry by making it comply to the same standards as other professions. There's the risk of interference that I've touched on. It minimizes the risk of regulation being imposed on us from the outside. It informs clients and the public. It builds trust with them, and it provides distinction to designers who have achieved certification. So what is certification? Well, it's not a license. Licenses are typically territorially based, and they restrict whether you can practice a trade or not. You cannot, for instance, be an electrician without a license. This is the sort of restriction that an outside authority could impose upon us if we persist without certification. It's not a test. CLD is not a test. There's nothing to revise for. And similarly, it's not an exam. It most certainly is not an award submission. Many people, a good many people, have said that they'll apply when they've got enough award-winning projects. That's completely irrelevant for a CLD application. CLD is not an association. Now, whilst IALD funds CLD, the certification program, that's the extent of it. Achieving CLD does not mean that you are a member of IALD or any other organization. What it is, though, is a competency assessment. It's an independent measurement of competency against standardized criteria. It shows that you've been independently assessed and you've demonstrated the standards expected of a competent professional lighting designer. So, a certified lighting designer is someone who's been independently measured against a standard set of global best industry practices and principles. Someone who has attained CLD has shown through their work, through the portfolio of their work, that they satisfy the standards and principles that define what it is to be an architectural lighting designer. Now, who benefits? Well, designers definitely benefit because it establishes a standard, and this raises the awareness of our profession. And there's a quote on the right of this slide you can read, and it's from Denise Fong, who says that her benefit is that CLD sets you apart from your competition. Our clients and general public also benefit from the credibility that a credential brings because it builds trust in our profession. Jenny Gillard, local if you live in Australia, local light designer, says that her clients are engaged. She likes it because she feels her clients are engaging with a professional of the highest standard, which in turn builds confidence for her. So, who is eligible? Well, CLD is specifically for architectural lighting designers. It's for a senior designer who has practiced at a senior level for at least 3 years. The applicant must have sufficient portfolio examples to illustrate responses to questions. This means that you've got to have a minimum of 2 projects and a maximum of 4. Now, if you've been a senior light designer for 3 years, having 2 or 4, up to 4 projects isn't going to be a problem. So how does the assessment work? Well, light designers have to answer some questions and support their answers with examples of their work. The questions all relate to a set of domains, and the domains are essentially areas of ability. These domains were developed through extensive research and industry consultations, and they evolved to define what is required to be considered a competent architectural lighting designer. Now, this is the domains here. As you can see, there are 7 of them, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but they are all pretty self-explanatory. You have to demonstrate that you delivered the outcome or the goal of that you promised your clients. Domain 2 is a way of you have to show that you collaborated etc., etc. They provide a standard for measuring the performance of CLD candidates, and applicants have to answer questions and show examples of their work against each domain. The CLD application is done entirely online. Now, Joe, who introduced this webinar, will be there as support, and he's somebody that you can contact if you have any difficulty with the online tool, but it's pretty straightforward. Each domain has between 2 and 3 questions, and you'll have to answer the question within 300 words. The questions they're all published in a handbook. So, very nice little document like this. There's no surprises. You can read the questions today and gather your thoughts and respond to them all in good time. You have to use examples from your portfolio to support your written responses. There's a maximum number of images that you can use to illustrate each written answer. You can use, as I said, between 2 and 4 projects to support your answers, and projects must be from at least 2 different types of work. For example, you can't just show residential work or just retail. You have to show another type of project. And the work must show interior and exterior experience, but it's not necessary to show both in each domain. You just have to show interior and exterior once. And you must submit a letter from your client or from somebody else in authority to show that you were the senior lighting designer on the projects that you've used. Once you've completed your application, professional members of the IALD and other approved lighting design associations pay a reduced fee of $525 US, and all others pay $625. Now that's a one-off fee for certification. Beyond that, as with every certification program, you must recertify every so often, and with CLD it's every 5 years, which is pretty typical. Recertification requires you to undertake at least 70 hours of professional development during the course of the next 5 years. So through a 5-year period, you have to acquire 70 hours of professional input, and the handbook explains what constitutes professional development. For example, attending a seminar for 1 hour will provide 1 hour towards your recertification, and you need 70 of them in total, gathered over 5 years. So it's pretty straightforward. That concludes this overview.
Thank you for listening to that pre-recorded earlier bit. And now we brought Peter on to answer any of your questions. And Peter Raynham is a member of the CLD Commission, which is the governing body for the CLD. And Peter, we do have one question: is it mandatory to have a postgraduate diploma from a lighting design program to become a certified lighting designer?
No, it's not. I wish it was, because we would get more students on our program, but no, it's not. Basically, the illustration there was what might be a typical person might do, but if you started in the profession many years ago, you probably these programs didn't exist. My guess, if you start in a lighting design practice nowadays, without a qualification, you'll eventually become a senior lighting designer with your own portfolio of work. It might take you a couple of years longer than having done a degree in the subject. I'd like to think that doing a degree in the subject helps you in your career. There might be some people out there who disagree with me.
And can you tell us how long how the review process works? So when someone submits an application, what happens?
So once you submit an application, then it is generally sent to a panel of assessors. Now, there are quite a few assessors, and I think each application goes to 3 assessors. And the assessors don't know who you are, and you will never know who the assessors are. And essentially, the 3 assessors look at your answers in every domain separately. They review those answers and they make a choice either to pass or to fail you in that domain. And provided two assessors pass you in each of your domains, then you will then get your CLD. If you fail one or two domains, then you will have an opportunity to come back, resubmit those domains and update your application, and still within the same round of application, still be capable of getting your CLD.
Great, thank you. Another question we have is, I want to use 2 projects from 2018. Is that a problem?
Not in the slightest. I think there is a regulation that you can't have projects which are more than 7 years old. So what I would suggest to you is don't hang about and wait till 2025 before putting your application in.
Yes. So Peter, you were a former reviewer before you became a member of the CLD Commission. What tips can you give to our attendees or people who want to submit an application on the best way to submit an application so that the reviewers find it easy to review?
I think the advice I would give is keep it simple and focus on answering the question. If the question asks you how you did a certain thing on in a particular design, then say, I did it this way. Don't answer a different question, and don't say this is the best project ever because this, that, and the other. What we're after as assessors is you to be able to demonstrate that you are basically a competent designer, not necessarily going to win awards, but you will deliver to the client or the design team essentially what they need from lighting designs, and you do it in a reliable and methodological and sound way. So assume that one thing I think that people don't consider is that somebody has actually got to read their responses sometimes. So make it easy on the reader.
Good advice.
Yes.
We do also have a question and greetings to you from Michael Husey, who wants to know whether you're aware of another certification, the European Lighting Expert.org.
Yes, I came across that about 5 or 6 years ago. And yes, there are other forums out there. I think none of these other global situations have really gained mass traction. I think the CLD is the one organization that seems to be consistently plugging away and developing these ideas and slowly building to a critical mass. So there are out there, and there are also other national bodies. I think in the United States, you get the NCQLP type programs. I think CLD is the only true program by lighting designers for lighting designers that is really out there getting traction and attracting people. So yes, there are a number of other people who realize the same problem, that we need something for the lighting profession. I think CLD is the organization that's actually got it up and running.
And Barry, let's see, we'd like to say, any suggestions for architectural lighting design graduates who continue working with research, a PhD, can they get the CLD certification?
They can, however, they're going to have some live projects. So in general terms, some of my PhD students will be doing a bit of work on the sly. I hope that all my PhD students are 100% dedicated to getting their PhD, but that isn't always the case. So if they are doing projects of their own, then that's fine. But if you're just doing academic research, that isn't really contributing to your skills as a lighting designer. So in some circumstances where there are real live projects, people designing things, the answer is yes. If you're just doing abstract research and dedicating to things like your professor tells you to, then the answer is probably no.
Okay. And so can you give us an idea of how long the process would take from perhaps the time they start an application to the time they might get a CLD?
Okay, so I would say the longest part of the process is convincing yourself that you're going to put away the time to actually fill in the form. My feeling is that once you've decided and thought about it, you should be able to find your project material, write to your clients, and get letters of attestation to support your exhibits and fill in the form in the space of a week. Now that means that's probably a week where you're only doing 50% time on your client, but there is a number of hours of work you're going to have to put in to get the form and all your paperwork organized. Once that's in, then the review process, I guess, takes a bit over a month. I don't know if Joe is on the line, but he could detail that. But my feeling is that that's about a month-ish. So from the point you decide you're going to do it, there's a delay till you can say, right, I'm going to block out some time to do it. Get the form in. You should get a turnaround in about a sort of month-ish type period.
Great. And that's actually all the time we have. A very quick session, but thank you all for attending. And Peter, thank you for coming on and answering questions.
Okay, well, I like to think that everyone listening has realized what a good program this is, and we will have a nice big flurry of applications coming in after Christmas.
Great. That would be great. All right. We'll hopefully see everybody at the closing, which will be in another 15 minutes or so. So thanks,
Okay,
Peter.
well, bye-bye.
Bye.